Star Trek. Nemesis didn't understand Captain Picard, and Jean-Luc's treatment of Troi proves it. Star Trek. Nemesis may have been the swan song of the Next Generation crew, but it didn't go out with the grace or insight fans expected from a franchise that helped define science fiction morality. Among its most glaring missteps was its shallow, tone-deaf treatment of Captain Jean-Luc Picard, especially in how he interacts with Counselor Deanna Troi. It's a subtle yet damning signal that the film didn't truly understand Picard's character or the bond between the TNG crew. Picard was always about empathy. Nemesis wasn't. Throughout Star Trek, The Next Generation, Captain Picard distinguished himself from other Starfleet captains through his intelligence, diplomacy, and above all, empathy. He wasn't just the man in charge, he was the moral compass of the ship. He deeply respected the autonomy and emotional well-being of his crew, especially Troi, whose role as counselor reflected the very values Picard held dear. But in Nemesis, this respect is shockingly absent. After Deanna Troi is psychically assaulted by Shinzen and his viceroy, an act akin to mental violation, the movie plays it largely for plot convenience. Worse still, Picard's reaction is disturbingly procedural and detached. There's no emotional fallout, no supportive dialogue, and certainly no scene where he offers Troi the kind of empathy he so frequently showed others in the series. The trauma is reduced to a plot device, and in that moment, Nemesis fails both Troi and the man who should have stood up for her. Troi's assault is brushed aside. Troi's telepathic violation should have been treated with gravity, not as a narrative shortcut. In The Next Generation, Troi's mental and emotional well-being were often protected with the same urgency that a physical injury would warrant. Picard especially respected her psychic boundaries. Recall how outraged he was when an alien race once forced her into painful telepathic contact and violations. He even reprimanded Worf once for being too emotionally aggressive toward her. Yet in Nemesis, after Troi's deeply personal attack, Picard barely acknowledges her pain. There's no scene where he checks in on her. No moment where he assures her of her dignity, her safety, or the crew's support. Instead, the trauma is weaponized in a tactical strategy. Troi is asked to use the psychic connection to find the enemy. And she does. Because the plot demands it. Picard's silence speaks volumes. The Jean-Luc we knew would have protested Troi being put in that position, even if it meant jeopardizing the mission. He might have ultimately agreed out of necessity, but only after showing that he understood the emotional weight of what he was asking. That conversation never happens. It's a jarring departure from the Captain Picard fans grew to admire. The Captain-Troi relationship deserved better. Jean-Luc and Deanna had a strong professional bond that was rarely the center of attention, but always woven into the background of TNG. He trusted her insights. He relied on her counsel. She, in turn, held him accountable when his emotions clouded his logic. Their dynamic wasn't flashy, but it was real and respectful. Nemesis discards that foundation in favor of shallow storytelling. Troi becomes a tool rather than a person, and Picard becomes a plot driver rather than a character. Their relationship is stripped of its nuance in service of urgency and spectacle. For a film that's supposed to be about Picard confronting himself, literally, in the form of Shinzen, it's ironic that he fails to display self-awareness or humanity when it matters most. The Jean-Luc of TNG would have ensured Troi had agency in every decision involving her trauma. The Jean-Luc of Nemesis barely notices it. Where was the moral leadership? Captain Picard has always embodied Starfleet's ideals. He's the guy who talks down godlike beings, brokers peace with hostile species, and gives heartfelt speeches about morality and justice. He's the man who refused to turn over data to be disassembled, who protected Hugh the Borg's individuality, who gave up personal happiness to uphold duty. But Nemesis forgets all of that. Instead, it gives us a version of Picard more comfortable giving orders than offering comfort. A Picard who sees Troi's violation as a tactical asset, not a personal tragedy. A Picard who, when the emotional core of his crew is attacked, doesn't show the emotional leadership that made him great. It's not that Picard had to react with rage or tears, but he did need to react. He needed to acknowledge what happened to Troi and show the audience that her suffering mattered. Without that, Nemesis strips him of his greatest strength, compassion.